what might this sound like in their head? I can't make this toy work the way I want. I can choose to try again the same way, try again with a new approach, or play with something else and come back to it later. Today we're going to be diving into the question, what does homeschooling look like for 1 and 2-year-olds? Developmentally appropriate learning for 1 and 2-year-olds includes 1, physical development of large muscles and small muscles, that is, gross motor skills and fine motor skills, language skills, which include expanding their understood vocabulary substantially, social emotional learning. Some of the things included in this area are pretend play, awareness of emotions, and interaction with others. This does not necessarily mean interaction with other toddlers until a child is getting closer to 3 years old. And the final area is a combination of cognitive development and executive function. Some areas of growth in this category include sensory integration, making choices, problem solving, and concentration. So then how do we help our children develop these skills, especially those of executive function? We do this by providing experiences that promote and focus on a lot of exploration, independence, and communication. Now, does this mean that you have to remove every toy that has letters and numbers from your child's reach? No, it doesn't. But the idea is that they never become the focus and the priority. They should simply be other vocabulary. For example, my children definitely had toys with letters and numbers on them and shapes and colors when they were in this age range. And the way that I approached it was simply, if my child pointed to one of those symbols, one of those images, and showed interest in it, I would just say, yeah, that's an H. But I'm not trying to force it, and I'm not trying to make them memorize it, because that is where we're crossing the line into what we shouldn't be doing at this age level. Now, another thing to consider about these toys, not only if they have letters and numbers or what the purpose is behind that, the other thing that we want to consider that gets pushed a lot in the toy industry today are battery-powered toys with buttons and lights where the child may just push a button and then the toy starts doing its thing. You really want to try to stay away from those kinds of toys and instead provide your child with toys that they have to manipulate, that they have to maneuver in order to make things happen and learn from them. So then what do you do when a family or friend lovingly gives a gift that has buttons that create sounds and lights? The approach that I took to them was to allow them to be used, but to limit where and when they were used. I also made sure that the toys that I was providing them were good quality. That is, not easily broken and open-ended toys. What I mean by open-ended toys is toys that don't have just one solution to them, with the exception of puzzles. So toys that they can play with and create and invent and use their imaginations with. The toys in my home consisted of nesting objects, blocks, Duplo Legos, wood puzzles, board books, stuffed animals, a toy kitchen with food basket, a Little People house, in December, a Little People manger, recycled boxes for a week here and there, musical toys like xylophone and drum, etc. These were the toys that I rotated out of the different spaces that my kids played in. So then let's consider the environment that you're setting up for your child. Have you ever noticed children, maybe even your own, flittering and fluttering from one toy to the next and only staying engaged with one toy maybe for 1 or 2 minutes and then going and trying something else and then going and trying something else over and over again? This can happen, one, for the reason of maybe battery-powered toys, but also when they have too many options. So really try to limit the options that you have in that area, rotate them out every once in a while with other toys that you may have. And in my case also, we had 2 different areas. We had the second floor bedroom, and then we had the living room and the first floor. So we had some toys there and some toys upstairs, and they were usually in one area or the other. Now when you have more than one child, this can become a little bit more complicated because that older child is taller, has more access, more mobility, and so they may be moving toys around, being able to reach toys that you have up higher and whatnot. So keep that in mind. But the environment goes beyond just the toys in a play area. We want to create opportunities for our children to begin to take small steps toward independence while simultaneously learning skills that are appropriate for this age level. In my home, we provided foldable steps that the kids could use in the kitchen, in the bathrooms, in other places of the house to be able to get themselves a cup of water, to begin to learn to wash their hands, to brush their hair, and things like that. My kids had their clothes in the closet on a low bar where they could reach them independently. And they also had drawers that were safely connected to the wall that were low down that they could get into and choose their clothing, take it out when they wanted to. And yes, at different points in the day, play dress up with their own clothing. But the skills that she was learning and the confidence that she was gaining through that process were way more important than having a perfectly organized clothing drawer every day, all the time. So with that said, honestly, there's a lot to be said for the mess that kids can make. As a side note, it's important to let them make that mess. But moving on, routines also complement this concept of environment. The moments, as I like to call them, that I prioritized on a weekly, if not daily basis were free play. This was the time when my child goes to find something he or she wants to play with. It doesn't matter if he plays alone or with a sibling. However, myself as mom, I make sure that my child is safe, but I don't usually engage in this specific moment unless my child comes and looks for me. The second one is outdoor exploration. This could be going to the park regularly, but also many times just going for a walk and talking about what we see and observe. The third one is reading time. It really is important to find a way to read even one book a day with your kids. They're not trying to learn to read. They're not necessarily trying to learn their letters, but what they are learning is an enjoyment of literature that is going to pay off over and over and over again when they get to school age, when they need to learn to read. Number 4 is sensory integration. You might be shaking your head right now thinking that will never work for me for one reason or another. And believe me, I get it, but just hear me out for a moment. I'm not going to go deep into this, but these are a few reasons why you might want to look into it more and consider how to fit it into your day. First, sensory activities, they don't have to be super complicated and exhausting. Some are really complicated, and I highly recommend that you just don't bother doing them. They don't need to be. Second, I found that my children and other toddlers that I've worked with informally and formally, they often engage with sensory activities so deeply and so peacefully that it actually can become a really relaxing part of your day. At least it did for me. But before continuing, let me know in the comments if this idea of sensory integration, sensory activities just freaks you out or not, and why. And finally, before moving on from sensory activities, the level of learning that can happen during sensory play is astronomical. I mean, really exponential. And you're really not going to want to miss out on that. The fifth moment is independent playtime. And this is different from free playtime in that it is meant to be alone time, with maybe 3 toys to choose from. Obviously, there are varying circumstances that determine how this might look for each family. But working toward this goal for each of your children can pay off in so many ways. Sixth is meal and snack times. Well, duh, you might be saying. But really, meal and snack times have always been an excellent opportunity for us to promote all kinds of learning, especially because mealtime is engaging pretty much all of the senses. And then finally, sleep and napping. Now, I know this one can be tough. If your child struggles to sleep through the night or to take a decent nap, I highly recommend that you visit the Baby Sleep site. I'm not endorsed by them. No one is paying me to recommend them. But the truth is, I have been a client of theirs. When my second child was little, there was a point where I paid for coaching to get him on a healthier sleep routine. And the money that we paid to get that coaching was so worth it. They really know what they're doing. They are so professional. They adjust to every family's style. And it really saved me from further sleep deprivation. And it saved the entire family from a cranky toddler and a cranky mom. Each of these moments I just described give your children lots of opportunities, frequent, well-rounded opportunities to grow in the areas that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. For example, independent play is an important opportunity for toddlers to practice making choices without the input of others. This includes the choice to just look at the ceiling. They also practice problem solving without help. What might this sound like in their head? I can't make this toy work the way I want. I can choose to try again the same way, try again with a new approach, or play with something else and come back to it later. And they also practice concentrating on solving a problem or on simply playing with one toy without any distraction from another person. Another example is mealtime. Meal and snack time isn't just about getting nourishment. Sensory input is happening at really high levels as children engage 4 and 5 of their senses consistently, especially if they are allowed to mostly feed themselves, touch their food, and get messy. It also helps and is really important that they're not distracted by other stimuli like TVs and tablets. Another reason that meal and snack time is so important is because as you let them practice feeding themselves, the physical development of their small muscles or their fine motor skills and hand-eye coordination are being worked on so much. They're getting to practice using those fine motor skills and that hand-eye coordination 4, 5 times a day, depending on how many snacks you have in your routine, without having to create a bunch of time-consuming specific activities that maybe you found on Pinterest or elsewhere, and they may or may not even work as you hoped after doing all that work to prepare them. Now, throughout all of this, observation is key. It helps us to find and keep our child in his or her sweet spot. What I mean by sweet spot is that point where your child is getting just the right amount of challenge, where something's not too easy for them and not too hard for them. And a way to know that is to just be able to observe them and let them keep trying for something and let them keep trying and try again. We don't need to step in every moment that they are challenged by something and give it to them, because that takes away their opportunity to grow and push their muscles and their brain and their perseverance. Observation also helps us to make decisions about routines. That is, how to order a child's day and when to adjust things. Because the reality is they're constantly changing. I observed that my daughter was less clingy when I went back and forth between independent type moments versus interacting with mommy type moments. For example, let's say we start out the morning with outdoor exploration. That's interaction with mommy. Then when we get back to the house, we go into free play, which is independent. After free play, we have snack together, another opportunity for interaction with mommy. Then back to free play again, then a morning nap, which doesn't really count as either of them. And after that morning nap, reading books together, which again is interaction with mommy. So there's that going back and forth between those types of activities. I also found that it was easier for my children to engage in free play in the mornings than in late afternoon. But I was also more tired late afternoon. So for a season of time, that was the moment when we would do sensory play. That's what worked for us. And a third thing I observed was how long my kids tended to stay engaged in the different moments, again, of the day. This gave me first an idea of how much might fit into the morning or in the afternoon, but I always maintained a level of flexibility to accommodate the days that my children, for one reason or another, may have a shorter attention span in free play or a longer attention span in free play or another moment, so that I could transition them to something else when they needed it the most. My rule of thumb usually was to let them play as long as they were in the zone. But I also learned to sense when my kids were beginning to lose steam, so that I could transition them to something else before they might get fussy, etc. And that obviously helps with behavior. We want to watch our kids. We want to kind of become a student of our own children and watch how they're learning and how they engage with play, so that we can promote more opportunities and help even better opportunities for them as they grow. As our children are growing, we do want to know kind of what they should be doing more or less in each stage. But with that knowledge, we also need to understand that that each child will focus on one area of their development without realizing it, maybe more than another. So you may have one child that at 1.5, they are already running like crazy and they're already figuring out how to put puzzles together and all kinds of things like that, but they're not really talking very much. But then you have another child who maybe you can tell that their language skills, that their understanding and what they're expressing verbally and with gestures is just flying off the charts. This actually was the case with my daughter. Her language skills grew exponentially, very rapidly at a very early age, and her motor skills came along and they were in the range that they should be in. But you had other kids that were walking 6 months before her or jumping already a couple months before her, and it really just doesn't matter. That's why there are ranges of development. But the other thing about this is that sometimes you're going to see your child and you go, well, their range should be this. What am I seeing? What should I do about it? The way that I have found to approach that has been healthy and helped me to just have peace of mind, but make sure that my children are moving forward the way they should, is to Be aware of those expectations. Keep an eye on them. The second that you see, oh, maybe they're supposed to be doing this, like go, they're not doing it. No, not at all. But if you do start to see maybe a delay, ask questions. Not scared questions, just, I need to be informed. I just want to make sure we're where we should be type questions. This also happened with my daughter. When she was in her first year, about 7 months old, she wasn't babbling yet. She wasn't blah, 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 making any of those types of sounds. And I saw that this milestone was already being, there maybe a month or two before, and she still wasn't doing it. So I didn't freak out about it. I just went and asked the question. In my situation, I was a friend with a speech therapist at the time, and so I just went and asked her. I said, hey, listen, this is what I've noticed. This is what I'm reading. This is what I'm researching, but this is what I'm seeing in my daughter. What do you think? Should I be concerned? Should I just wait? Is there some strategies that I should use to help her? So the friend of mine basically just said, you know what, just let's keep observing for a couple more weeks, 2 more weeks, I think she said. Observe for 2 more weeks, and during those 2 weeks, use these strategies with her and see how it goes. Okay, great. So I was working at the time, I wasn't homeschooling yet, so I went and I said, hey, to my father-in-law who got to see her frequently, I said, hey, I need you to, can you help me out with this? Whenever you go see her, can you do these things with her? And they were very simple to implement. And he did, and he had so much fun with her, and at those 2 weeks, she was babbling. So we moved on. But those observations were important, and it was important to ask the question, because those are things that maybe if you just let them go for months and months on end and don't ask the questions, they could become serious and much more difficult to correct. I didn't worry myself, but because I asked the question in a timely moment, I was able to get an answer that had a 2-week solution versus months and months of therapy later on. Now, moving beyond that point about expectations, it's also important to remember to model. Our kids will do what they see us doing. If they see us reading lots of books, they're going to want to open books and look at them as well. If they see us on a cell phone, they're going to want to be on a cell phone. If they see us being kind and sharing, they're going to want to do that. And even in the physical development, if you're trying to help your child learn to crawl, one thing that I learned with my kids is that I got down on the floor and crawled so that they could see what that looked like, and then they started to go, and they also started trying it. So this whole modeling, it goes into every area that you can think of. Some big keys to our success as we homeschooled our children were age-appropriate expectations, lots of modeling, as I just stated, creating an environment that promotes learning, exploration, and curiosity, lots of flexibility whenever possible, like I mentioned with the routines. Remember, 1 and 2-year-olds' sleep needs are continuously changing, which means there will be gradual adjusting of when you do what frequently throughout those 2 years. That is to say, don't get too stuck on making the perfect schedule, the perfect routine. Take things a day at a time. But then balance what I just said with consistency. Consistency referring to the general order of what happens day to day and week to week. Some things that I did not do and I purposely, intentionally stayed away from during the 1 and 2-year-old stages were worksheets, coloring pages. So did my kids do coloring? Yes, lots of coloring. On blank pages of white paper, on whiteboards, using chalk on the sidewalk. They did coloring and they did drawing, but they did not do coloring pages where they're coloring inside the lines. We did not do posters on the wall teaching different concepts, nor did I prepare cute Pinterest crafts for my children to finish. It's really better for you to give them materials and just let them see what they will do with it. Keep things open-ended. They will learn creativity, they will learn more confidence this way, and you really, in the process, also make much less work for yourself. I was not creating teacher materials and activities to do with my child, with the exception of some sensory bins. It just wasn't necessary. I hope today's topic helped shine some light on what your homeschool journey could look like with your 1 and 2-year-old. If so, subscribe to the channel for future content. Thank you so much and see you again soon.